So I want to talk to you today. My task today is to open Scripture and to open wisdom, and I take that quite seriously. And so anytime you open the Bible, you want to ask a couple questions. One, what happened? And two, more importantly, what's happening in me right now because of what happened? And so the theme of this year for the men is discipline and intention and training and these sorts of things. So I want to speak around these truths, and then I want to open up something Jesus said, and then I want to open up some of the ancient wisdom literature and see where we find ourselves in this. Because really, discipline and intention comes down to guarding our heart by protecting our eyes and ears and paying attention to our mouth, right? So if we can guard what goes into if we can guard what goes in, we will guard what comes out. And that's what it really comes down to. It comes down to, can we be disciplined enough and intentional enough to guard what goes in our eyes and in our ears? You know, it's like the psychological profession is reporting that more people are reporting pathological levels of anxiety than ever before, which is sort of strange, particularly amongst young adults, which as a 45-year-old, if a 21-year-old says, I'm anxious, I'm thinking, what do you have to be anxious? You live at home. You have no bills. Like, what could there possibly be to be? You have, according to Forbes magazine, you have more money available to you at your age than the previous 4 generations before it combined had at that age, and yet we're still reporting pathological levels of anxiety. And it's a very real thing. And what this is showing us is that more money, more stuff, and more information doesn't necessarily lead to less anxiety. It actually, too much information going in leads to more anxiety. Too many things telling us what the truth is leads to more anxiety. And actually, access to too much stuff makes us anxious about what we need to protect. And so there's got to be something in the wisdom that says, wait a minute, where have we missed this? And the truth of it is that discipline is part of the story, and intention is. And it comes down to guarding our eyes, guarding our ears, guarding our heart, and letting the litmus test be of what's going in is what's coming out. And we can look at this. I want to, just a couple of quick observations about this, then I want to open up something Jesus said. One, heroic people have certain things in common. Heroic people have the clarity to see and the urge to act. Heroes have the clarity to see. If you ever listen to me preach that much, you'll always notice that at the end of almost every message I ever preach, when I pray for the people, I say, Lord, give us the clarity to see things different, the irresistible urge to act upon what we see. Because here's the truth, right? No matter where you go, in this room, there's lots of personalities, lots of preferences, lots of passions, lots of different things, right? In this room right now, there are introverts, right? This is the first time you've left home since Netflix was introduced, right? And you're like, this is stretching me. There's people running around at high speeds, and I'm sort of an introvert. That's you. There's certain ones of you that are a party waiting to happen. Right? Like nobody brings more energy to a room than T. Can we just, can we, right? Like we're watching pre-made videos and T's like, yeah, right? This is the guy you want around you for energy. So there are introverts, there are extroverts, there are ambiverts. You can go either way. Hopefully there's not any perverts in here, right? That's the way that is, right? But here's the thing about all of us is we all want to be perceived by our peers, and if we're married, definitely by our spouse as a winner. As somebody that has more than enough. As something, we want, and here's the thing that sets those people apart. They have the clarity to see and the irresistible urge to act upon what they see. Another observation too, we do not have to intend to fail. Living without intention will lead to failure automatically. In other words, you don't have to intend to destroy yourself. You just have to have no intention, and failure will just be a normal part of it. Like, you don't have to intend to be a bad dad. You just have to have no intention of being a good dad. And then bad dad behaviors overtake us. You don't have to intend to be broke. You just have to have no intention of having financial security. And brokenness will overtake you. Because if we don't know what to say no to, we'll say yes to everything. And then what happens is we dumb our life down to a basic question of, is it right or wrong? Which is a destructive thought, if it's the only thought. If the only thought we have is this right or wrong, we'll destroy our lives. Because there are a lot of things that aren't wrong, but they're not wise. And the better question is this wise? And is this getting to me to where my intention wants to go, right? And so is it wrong to spend that money on that thing? Well, no, it's not wrong, but that thing's going to go down in value, and it's not wise. The question is, does this get me where I intend to go? In other words, nobody wakes up intending to be perceived as a loser. But yet there are people who woke up today and they're perceived by their peers and their spouse as a loser. Why? Because they do loser things. Why do they do that? Well, because they have no intention of doing winner things. So what's the answer to that? The answer to that is discipline and intention and clearly knowing where we're going and then gauging the behaviors along the way, not by is it right or wrong, but is it wise, is it useful, and does it get me there? Because without intention, failure is just a normal part of our existence. Number 3. Recent research is proving that grit, which is defined as passion and perseverance working together, recent research is proving that grit is the number one predictor of success. It's not where you were born. It's not your socioeconomic class that you grew up in. It's not your level of education. It's actually not your IQ. That was weird, right? It's not your IQ. It helps. Good IQ helps. It does. Starting with some money helps, but it's not the number one predictor. The number one predictor of success is grit. If you want to read a good book on this, it was written by a Stanford researcher called Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth's a PhD level Stanford researcher that West Point, the military academy in America, hired her to develop a battery of tests because here's what they found. That West Point went to great lengths to pick the best of 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 the best. The smartest, the most active, the most athletic, the most physically rigorous. They went to great lengths to pick the best of the best. You had to actually get a congressional appointment and go through everything you had to do that. And what they found is even though they picked the best of the best of the best of the best of the best, roughly 30% of the recruits were quitting within the first 2 weeks, which led them to this question: why would you go through all that and quit in 2 weeks? What are we missing here? And they hired Angela Duckworth to come in and fix the problem. And she said the one thing that was missing is you're testing everything except grit. And so she developed a psychological battery to test grit. And they went from 30% dropping out of 1,500 to only 60 people dropping out of 15. In other words, you can't overestimate the power of perseverance and passion going on and not giving up. But that comes from discipline, that comes from training, and that comes from intention. Let's say it this way. Number 4, discipline is the training for how to act in a situation before it happens. It is active intention. Training has to do with what we go through before it happens. Military training is not something you do in the heat of battle. Military training is something you do thousands of times before the heat of battle. Can you imagine someone that's never cocked a rifle and they're trying to do that in the heat of battle? No, they do it without thinking. This is true especially in anything where people are winning, like athletics. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter in the history of the NBA. He went to high school at Charlotte Christian School and played his high school basketball for a coach named Sean Brown. Now, Sean Brown played against me in high school. What that means is absolutely nothing. I don't know those people, but here's the thing. I find comfort and I have a loose connection with this guy. But the truth of it is that the stories about Steph Curry are unbelievable, that he regularly hits 100 three-pointers in a row in practice with no one on him. He goes through a physical regimen of training because he's my size in the NBA and he knows he has to be more fit than everybody else. And so he has a special forces guy train him so he is more physically fit than anybody else. They recently put a group of university athletes through Steph Curry's cardiovascular routine and not one of them completed it and 3 of them threw up. This is training. What you see people make look easy is only easy because of the training before. Tiger Woods doesn't hit a great chip in the pressure of the PGA Championship. Having never trained, he's hit thousands of those shots. And in that moment, he can make his mind go back to the training and just duplicate the thing. People who are good at things always make that thing look easy, right? Somebody said to me within the last month, they said, Shane, how lucky is your life? Hey, all you got to do is get on stages and speak, and that's like it. And I'm thinking, thank you? I don't even know what to say to that. Like, the truth of it is that's a big part of my life. It's definitely not the only part of my life. But what people don't see is the hours it takes to put together a talk that's only going to last for 30 minutes, and people are only going to remember roughly 5% of it, right? And so you have to do things to get people to remember more of it, and that requires training and practice. It's discipline. I write and I study 2 hours every day. Every day of my life, I write and study 2 hours. I'm writing new material every day. Why? Because I have to have something meaningful to say, and it has to be fresh. If I show up every year saying the same exact thing, it's not compelling. Now, people who are good at stuff make it look easy, but there's always training behind it. There's a guy at the golf club I play at. He's on the European tour. And I have regularly showed up at the golf course at 7 a.m. and he has beat me there, and he's over there with his practice bag practicing his chips from all different places. And then I have played 4 hours of golf, come back, and he has regularly still been standing in that same place, right? And people, when he's on TV, people go, wow, man, he makes that look easy. But that thing is built in something in secret. Here's the truth of it is what we hallow in secret, we manifest in public, right? What gets our full attention in our secret place, this is true spiritually. Jesus said, in your secret place, say, my Father who's in heaven, hallowed be your name. In John 17, he says, Father, I've manifested your name to everybody that you've put into my path. In other words, what you hallow in secret, you manifest in public. That whatever we're manifesting in public somehow was hallowed in secret. And so if our public manifestation is random with no intention and win some, lose some, it's that kind of thing, well, what that reveals is some sort of lack of training underneath it. This should actually be true if you own a business. If you hire a new employee, you should be putting them through a training regimen so that they know how to handle customers in the heat of the moment. This should make us rethink how we raise children. The scripture says this, train up a child in the way they should go, and in the end, they won't depart from it. Train up a child. We've replaced that with, when they misbehave, we punish them. But that's not what the wisdom literature called us to do. The wisdom literature called us to train children before the heat of the moment to avoid more punishment. And I know some of you right now are thinking, my kids are raised. Oh, I missed that. But for the ones that are having children right now, instead of waiting for them to mess up and punishing them, what if we took the wisdom of the scripture seriously and trained them in situation when there was nothing, even something as simple as how to handle a no. Create a training moment where the kid asks, can I have ice cream? There's no real ice cream on the line. And you go, no. And they go, thank you, Daddy, I love you. Right? You practice these things. You practice how to handle a yes. You practice how to handle a no. Why do we train in every other area in life in order to win, but with children, we just sort of wing it, right? It's the training that makes the way. Let's say it this way. Number 5, having gauges to determine the health and course of my life is the key to being disciplined. If we don't know what gauges indicate danger, then eventually the car breaks down. The question is what gauges are we looking at? We're going to talk about some of those in a second. Number 6, right practice is essential in discipline, not just right belief. Right belief really without right practice is sort of useless. One writer said it this way, faith, right belief, without works, right practice is dead. This is talking about the quality of one's life is not found in what they believe, because actually the only beliefs that matter are the beliefs that are so in us that they affect our behavior, right? It's more about practice, because the intention of our heart never ultimately gets us where we want to go. It's always the road that we're on, always the road that you're traveling. If you get on the A2 with intention of going to Brisbane, but you're heading towards Dalby, you're going to be very disappointed with the size of Brisbane, right? And you get to Dalby and you're like, well, there's a McDonald's, maybe they'll know, right? And so you go in and you're like, hey, where's Brisbane? And they're like, well, you're in Dalby, mate, right? And he's like, well, yeah, but I intended to go to Brisbane. And the person's going to say, it doesn't matter if you intended to go to Brisbane, bro, you were heading west and Brisbane is east. The right belief is only part of the story. It's making sure that our behavior is on the right path. Now, there's this guy named Jesus, and he was a first century rabbi, and he was teaching his followers how to live. And in this story, he's not teaching them how to go to heaven when they die, although we affirm that. In this story, he's teaching them how to live the best life here by learning to see the world how he sees it. Because Jesus isn't somebody to simply believe in. Jesus is somebody to so profoundly connect to that it fundamentally shifts the way we see our whole world, right? And here is his observation about this. This is what he says. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because its foundation was on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain comes down, the streams rise, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. A couple observations about application for this. Number one, both people in Jesus' story face the storm, the same exact one, but one stands and the other falls. In other words, you cannot tell the condition of your life by the specific circumstance you're in today. Because sometimes people whose foundation is on the rock are facing the same storm that people whose foundation is on the sand is facing. And it's not about belief. It's about the foundation of the practice of our life. And what Jesus promises is this, is that when we put his way of living into practice, it doesn't mean we won't suffer. It just means that in the suffering, we won't fall. For Jesus, wisdom doesn't matter unless it's applied. That wisdom doesn't matter unless it's applied. Number three, applying wisdom requires discipline and training before the situation. How we handle conflict requires training in the secret place before the situation. How we speak to somebody when we don't get our way requires wisdom and training before the situation. How we spend our money requires wisdom and training before the situation. Wise people with money sit down on the first of every month and they tell their money what to do. Foolish people let their money tell them what to do because money is a great servant but a horrible master. And wise people understand that. Now, I'm going to tell my money where it's going to go, and that's what that money's going to do to make my life and other people's lives better. Otherwise, we end up paying Visa, MasterCard, Ford Motor Credit, and ANZ Bank before we bless our community, our pastors, ourselves, and the poor. And that's a problem. This all comes down to wisdom being applied, has to do with thinking it through and practicing it through in the secret place before it happens, because what we hallow in secret, we manifest in public. Which leads me to the book of Psalms. So Psalms is in the wisdom literature. It was originally written as prayers that we were meant to pray on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. It was something that was meant to ground us in wisdom. And so there's this beautiful prayer in Psalm 15 where a guy, whoever wrote Psalm 15, maybe it was David, maybe I don't know, somebody wrote Psalm 15, and it's in the wisdom literature, and he makes this statement that people who do these things, their life will never be shaken. In other words, here's how to earthquake-proof your life, which sounds similar to the metaphor Jesus uses on rock and sand. In other words, when things get shaky, you want something on the rock. Psalm 15 says, people who do these things, they'll find themselves with a life that is not suffering-free, but in the suffering, it can never be shaken. And here's what the writer of Psalm 15 says. Lord, who may dwell in your sanctuary, and who may live on your holy hill? He whose walk is blameless, and who does what is righteous. He who speaks the truth from his heart, and has no slander on his tongue. He who does his neighbor no wrong, and casts no slur on his fellow man. You could see the grammatical style here. It's a parallelism. The writer is saying something that's hard and then including something that's actually heavier. He's saying, if you do this, do this and that. Oh, if you do this and that. If you do this and that. He keeps going. Who despises a vile man, but honors those who fear the Lord. Who keeps his oath even when it hurts him. Who lends his money without usury, and does not accept a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things will never be shaken. It's not about people who believe those things are darkness and death and decrease. It's about people who believe it enough to put these things into practice. Now, words matter less than how we picture words working, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick survey of these character traits that can lead to an unshakable life, which requires intention, discipline, and training in the private place so that we manifest it in public. All right, so number one, he says, a blameless man and a righteous person. And he puts it in the same sentence. Now, blameless has nothing to do with being perfect. It's not blameless in the Hebrew words is not somebody that is mistake-free. It's better, in today's English, it'd be better an authentic man, an authentic person. Blameless is not, you don't make mistakes. Blameless is more if all the lights were turned on and everything was revealed, you'd have nothing to really be shocked and ashamed about. It's not if all the lights were turned on in your life that you would not have any mistakes. It's just if the lights were turned on, there would be people who knew about it. It's more nothing is hidden. Not everything is fixed. It's more nothing needs to be hidden. It's the thing that, let's say it this way. If, let's say as a man, you might struggle occasionally with certain addictive behaviors around computer screens, all right? So I'll speak in that kind of code. It's the freedom to know that you no longer have to remember if you've deleted your browser history before your wife finds out. That it's something more profound than, I haven't looked at that. There's a freedom in having no fear of being caught. That does it. Like I was, this was way back when I was counseling. One of the most moving things I ever had when I was a counselor was a guy came to me and said, look, I've been cheating on my wife and I'm stopping. I cannot take the anxiety and the pain one more day, and I want to talk this through, and I am stopping. And I said, what convicted you to stop? And he said, I was laying in my bed in a panic because I could not remember if I deleted the last text. And she brought me my phone, and I knew she'd never look at the phone, but in her having the phone in her hand, it made me panic about getting caught. And I decided I am sick of living in the fear of being found out, and I'm not gonna live that way one more day. And I thought, shoot, this person gets it. It's not just about the rationalization of sexual behavior. It's about the freedom of not being afraid of the lights coming on in the situation. That's blameless. And we've all seen things and heard things and saw reports and seen things on the news where something was hidden. And when something suddenly comes to light, it's something that was hidden that was so bad, it shakes the world around those people. In other words, the psalmist is like, may it be our prayer that we live authentically, and righteous. Righteous in this word is generous. It's someone, righteousness is not defined by what we abstain from. Righteousness is defined by the actions we enter into. In other words, the psalmist is pointing out that a blameless person is someone that spends their energy making everybody else's life better, and they don't have enough energy to live unblameless on the other end, right? It's that. It's someone who lives authentically and generous. The second one was with truth on their tongue, but then he adds a thing, and no slander. In other words, they speak the truth, unless that truth is going to really harm somebody, and then they hold that too. Slander in Hebrew is not a lie. It's saying truths that bring someone shame. The Hebrew is actually, the Hebrew word for slander is motzei shem ra, which is so cool. It sounds like a Marvel villain, doesn't it? Like, oh, Stark, who's that? Oh my God, it's motzei shem ra, right? That's slander. Slander is telling a truth that could hurt someone by giving them a bad name. And it's interesting that the word in Hebrew for slander is motzei. The word for leprosy is motzer. And what the rabbis say is that slander and leprosy are the same thing. It's tied together in language because of Miriam slandering Moses and getting leprosy. But they say because leprosy divides community and it infects a lot of people, so is slander. So they see slander. In other words, here's an unshakable life. Authentic and generous. Truth-telling, unless that truth you know is going to hurt someone, and then you're disciplined enough to hold your mouth. 3, no intentional harm, not even in a rumor. No intentional harm, not even in a rumor. He's basically saying the same thing twice. You don't intentionally harm someone, even if it's your right to do so, not even if it's simple as a rumor. He says, you want to be disciplined and unshakable? Here's what you do. You discipline yourself to live authentically and generously. You discipline yourself to tell the truth unless that truth you know is going to bring harm to someone else. Because unshakable people never intentionally harm somebody else, even if it's just a rumor. Number 4, the psalmist says, keep what is common and what is holy clear. It's sort of a rough sounding sentence. It says, he who despises a vile man, but honors those who fear the Lord. Now, once again, words matter less than how we picture words working. So when I say despise, that sounds like hate, right? But in Hebrew, the word translated despise is to treat something that is sacred as if it's common. It's used, so Esau despised his birthright. It doesn't mean he hated it. It means he took something that was holy and sacred and treated it as if it was nothing more than a bowl of beans, right? It's that. In other words, the psalmist says unshakable people have the skill of separating the common from the holy. And they don't mix the two. The common belongs in a certain place and the holy belongs in a certain place. And when we mix the common with the holy, it starts to add some instability to our life. Right? Number 5, this is what he says. He says, an unshakable person keeps his word at all costs. Even if it costs you. If you promise something, deliver. Because nothing destroys people's credibility like getting a reputation for promising and then under-delivering. If you under-promise and over-deliver, that's a much, much better situation than over-promising and under-delivering. Like when people, I don't have any control over what people think about me other than my own behavior and presenting myself well. One of the things as a guest speaker that I make a commitment, I'm very disciplined about this. I always want to be the easiest guest speaker any church ever has. Why? Because when churches have guests, sometimes guests are pain in the butt, okay? And I was never going to do that. I was on staff at a church of 4,000, and we had some pains in the butts. And here's the one thing that sets all the pains in the butts in one circle, and that's this: they never get asked back, right? Even if they're really good, they never get asked back. I wanted a reputation for under-promising and over-delivering than I would ever want a reputation for over-promising and under-delivering. The prayer of the psalmist is, may we be people who under-promise and over-deliver, even if it brings us pain. Keep our word. The 6th thing he says is he says that unshakable life is one that's disciplined to protect the poor and the marginalized. That when you look at your life, are you intentionally every week making somebody else's life better who can do nothing in return for you? So here was the prayer of the psalmist. May we be people who are authentic and generous, who tell the truth unless we know it's going to hurt somebody, and then we're self-controlled enough to hold it. That we would never intentionally harm, even if it's just a rumor. That we keep it clear what is common and what is sacred. That we overpromise. No, so we over, what am I trying to say? We underpromise and overdeliver. It's my first time ever preaching this. Give me some grace here. We underpromise and we overdeliver, and we make a discipline of taking care of the poor and the afflicted. Now, good sermons are not meant to be agreed with or disagreed with. They're meant to be wrestled with for application. We should be talking about this and how do we apply this. A couple of questions. 1, am I blaming others when the problem is actually my lack of discipline? At some point, we have to come to the realization to empower our life that it's not everybody else's fault. That the reason that I haven't been promoted is not because no one's ever saw my talent. That used to be a thing. But now with the internet, if you're talented, at some point, somebody's going to see you, right? And the truth of it is that they're not holding you back. The truth of it is that the problem might be the person you shave with. And that we have to be honest enough to go, wait a minute now, I need to take responsibility. That even before sin entered the story of the scripture, people got their meaning from how well they took responsibility for their world. And when sin entered the story, the first thing they did was started blaming. And so part of living a disciplined, intentional, trained life is taking responsibility for what my role is in my story. Number 2, do I practice in secret what I want in public, or am I waiting for something to randomly happen? Do I practice in secret what I want in public? This could be behaviors. What we practice in secret, we will manifest in public. If you're walking into a new situation, the imagination you build in your mind will determine the atmosphere from which you walk into that situation with. So if you think you're going to fail, you will create an atmosphere around you and failure will come. If you think they're not going to like you, you will create that atmosphere and you'll put off something, and sure enough, they won't like you, and you'll prove yourself right. Because if you think you can't, you're right. If you think you can, you're right. If you think it's hard, you're right. If you think it's easy, you're right. Whatever you think determines what we become. And that comes from our secret place. This is true spiritually, that where you want to go spiritually is built in the secret place. If you're going to build a ministry, you're going to build a youth ministry, you're going to build a children's ministry, you're going to build a church, you're going to be a part of a men's ministry. Whatever you're trying to build, if it's not built in secret, eventually it falls because it doesn't have the foundation. Whatever we're building in secret should be what we want in public. We should give all of our attention to the outcome we do want and no attention to the outcome we don't, because the secret place determines what comes out in public. Number 3, is my life blameless? Am I authentic? Like if I present myself as generous, if someone investigated my bank account, would they find, you know, we turned the lights on in this guy's bank account, and turns out he's generous. Or would they find that we're presenting ourselves in such a way that if all the lights got turned on, it would actually ruin people's reputation around what they think we are? There's a much more solid way to live, which is, am I living authentically? Is my mouth disciplined? People say, oh, well, I told the truth. Yeah, okay. Telling the truth is a good thing unless it's the only thing you think of, because there's a lot of truths that should be held, right? Some things just shouldn't be shared. When Paul put his filters on it, he said true, lovely, of good report, excellent, praiseworthy, right? So something might be true, but it's not excellent. It's not praiseworthy. It's not wise. Pure truth isn't exactly what everybody wants, right? Like if your wife asks you, does this dress make my butt look big? Pure truth is probably not the way to go. Because the pure truth might be, no, your butt makes your butt look big. The dress actually isn't helping, but dresses don't make butts look big. Butts make butts look big, right? That might be the pure truth, but that is unwise. It's not going to get you where you want to go, right? Like part of unshakable life is telling the truth, but with no slander, with no rumor, with nothing that hurts. Number 4, how do I treat the poor? Am I intentionally and disciplined looking after people who can't do anything in return? Last question I want us to wrestle with. Rock or sand? Rock or sand? No matter who you are, storms are going to come, rain's going to blow, wind's going to hit. Things that are outside of our control, human freedom and natural law can overtake us sometimes. The issue isn't the right with God don't suffer. The issue is the people who have an unshakable life. They find themselves in the middle of it on the rock. And to Jesus, the rock was not what you believed. It was how you lived. If you hear these words and put it into practice. See, people say, my foundation is the rock. Why? Because I believe in Jesus. So, demons believe. To Jesus, the rock or the sand was not about belief. It was belief so ingrained that it affected our practice. So, my brothers and sisters, up at the top there, of New Hope, may we be people who live an unshakable life. Training, discipline, and intention. May we choose the rock and never the sand. Grace and peace, everybody. God bless.